Anne Bilansky, known for being the only woman ever executed in the state of Minnesota. Anne was a housewife who was convicted of murdering her husband using arsenic to poison him. She was hanged on March 23, 1860, in Ramsey County, Minnesota. During the trial, Anne claimed she was not receiving a fair and just trial. After she was sentenced to death, the governor of Minnesota refused to set a date for her execution, and the state legislature even tried to pass laws stating she had not received a fair trial to prevent her execution. Guilty or not, Anne was executed anyway. This is her story. Mary Ann Bilansky was known by her middle name Anne. She was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where she lived for several years until her first husband passed away in an unfortunate railroad accident. She then briefly moved to Pleasant Hills, Illinois, then to St. Paul, Minnesota in April 1858, when a man she claimed was her nephew, John Walker, asked her to move to the city to help care for him during his battle with typhoid fever. Shortly after moving to St. Paul, Anne married Stanislaus Bilansky. Stanislaus was a wealthy man who drank heavily. He owned a house that also doubled as a saloon and grocery store. Stanislaus had custody of his 3 young children after his previous wife divorced him. Anne frequently took care of his 3 children when Stanislaus was working. Beginning March 6, 1859, Stanislaus fell ill with what was assumed at the time to be indigestion. His condition continued to worsen as he tried to treat his ailment with liquor and some Grafenberg pills. Based on the limited amount of information available regarding what the fuck Grafenberg pills are, I've concluded that they were used to treat every illness imaginable. Anyway, enough about the snake oil. During Stanislaus's sickness, their housekeeper witnessed Anne crying by his bedside, asking what she would do with the kids in case anything happens. Stanislaus passed away on March 11, 1859. After his death, officials from the Ramsey County Coroner's Office decided to do some investigating into Stanislaus's untimely death. A medical examination was done, which found the death was due to natural causes. Though the examiner questioned why Anne had not called the doctor for her husband, Stanislaus was then buried. There was a coroner's jury assembled to give testimony on Stanislaus's final days. The jury consisted of John Walker, Anne's nephew, a visiting neighbor named Lucinda Kilpatrick, and the housekeeper, Rosa Scharf. On the evening after Stanislaus was buried, March 12th, Kilpatrick claimed that she had seen Anne buying arsenic from a drugstore on February 28th. Anne's rebuttal was that Stanislaus had asked her to buy the arsenic for killing rats, which is fairly reasonable considering that was the entire reason you could buy arsenic. Because of this accusation, the body was exhumed and re-examined. Anne was arrested on March 13, 1859, for murdering her husband. It's wild to me that he went from alive to dead, got buried, got dug back up, and his wife arrested, all in 48 hours. The pharmacist who sold Anne the arsenic was also brought in to examine the body. He testified that there was a single crystal found that resembled arsenic. Another pharmacist testified that he was skeptical that Stanislaus had been poisoned at all. With this small amount of information, a grand jury indicted Anne for murder, and her trial date would be May 23rd. The trial was held at Ramsey County Courthouse. The prosecution made 3 main arguments against Anne. Firstly, she had purchased arsenic. Secondly, she reportedly had inappropriate relations with Walker, her nephew, which was her motive to kill her husband. Third, she had supposedly made comments that would suggest that she had been plotting murder. One of the witnesses, Kilpatrick, claimed that Anne had told her, "I would not mind giving him a pill," when she bought the arsenic. The housekeeper, Scharf, testified that Anne made his meals and washed his dishes separately. She also claimed that Anne did not treat Stanislaus the way a husband should be treated. Back in this day, that could have meant that Anne made dinner 5 minutes late once. Sounds like the housekeeper possibly had a thing for Stanislaus. Further testimonies reiterate that Anne was having an affair with Walker. Within 6 hours, the jury claimed Anne was guilty. Reportedly, Anne had no reaction upon hearing the verdict. The defense was declined a new trial, and the Minnesota Supreme Court declined when Anne's attorney requested their help in preventing Anne from receiving the death penalty. During Anne's time in jail, she did briefly escape on July 25th. She was captured on August 1st, hiding near Como Lake with a fair partner and nephew, John Walker. According to the newspaper, the Weekly Pioneer and Democrat, it seems many people had tried to help her escape jail. One woman was even caught trying to switch clothes with Anne so she could make her escape. Finally, on December 2nd, she had her sentencing. In court, she stated, "If I die in this case, I die an innocent woman. I don't think I have had a fair and just trial." She received 1 month in solitary confinement to be followed by death by hanging. The Minnesota governor at the time, Henry Sibley, refused to set an execution date and instead waited for his term to end in 1859. Sibley was not the only government official that took action, though. The Minnesota House of Representatives took efforts to end capital punishment. There was even a bill introduced that didn't allow women to be executed. None of the efforts succeeded, though. On January 25, 1860, a new governor, Alexander Ramsey, set Anne's execution date for March 23, 1860. A bill was passed by the state on March 5th that stated Anne had had an unfair trial, but it was shortly vetoed by the new governor. Anne was denied her wish to be privately executed and instead had thousands of people watch her die. Anne's last words before her death on March 23, 1860 were, "I die for the good of my soul and not for murder. Your courts of justice are not courts of justice, but I will yet get justice in heaven." She was buried in an unmarked grave in Calvary Cemetery. I don't know if Anne was innocent or guilty. I personally do not believe that a trial lasting only 6 hours could have possibly been fair. I'm just glad I don't live in a time where buying rat poison from the store is enough to get convicted of murder.